let's talk about the border. Okay.
Let's do it.
Recently, Biden has tried to pass an immigration bill that had funding for the border. It was rejected by Republicans. Trump killed the bill, if you will. Um, a lot of Republicans said for good reason it wasn't enough, right? So I would just want to talk about Biden's policies on the border. I'm going to give it to Rob first this time, right? How do you think Biden has been on the border? Where has he succeeded? Where has he failed? And what policies, and I want to stick on the policies, right, has he either ignored or pushed forward that has either exacerbated the problem or helped solve it? Go ahead, Rob.
So we'll talk about policies, but more important than policies is the signaling that he sent that caused the problem in the first place. But let's talk about policies. When he comes in office, he rescinds, 90-something executive orders, including remain in Mexico. We could see that the numbers under Trump were remarkably lower than Biden. The numbers of people that are coming across the border under Biden, there is no way to spin them. They are historic highs. They continue to be high, even if you have slight gluts, and they didn't care about it. They gaslit the American people, including Biden himself and his secretary Mayorkas, that gaslit people that this wasn't a crisis. Meanwhile, we could see that it's a crisis not just for the people in the communities where these illegals end up, where you see now inner city communities that are saying we can't handle it anymore. We were told it was all fine when it was conservative border cities. It was fine to have all those people there. But send 40 people to Martha's Vineyard for 24 hours and Miyama, have your Fruit Loops and see you later. We can't handle it anymore. You see this occurring in all sorts of city council meetings in traditionally black neighborhoods now, where they feel that they've been suffering from poverty for years and years. Democrats have done nothing to help them, but all of a sudden they're sending fat checks out to illegal immigrants. Biden's administration did nothing and allowed this wave to occur. They thought that it helped them politically. They were happy with the import of cheap labor and the import of people that would ideologically more likely agree with them. So they did nothing about this crisis. And now during an election year, they try to come out and say, oh, actually, it was a problem all along. Wasn't a problem in 2021, wasn't a problem in 2022, wasn't a problem in 2023. But now in 2024, it's a problem, and it's Trump's fault. That's whose fault it is. The bill they put forth is garbage. What it would have done would give all sorts of loopholes. The House bill that was put forth would have done far better, even though it didn't go far enough either. And Biden would be able to issue executive orders or reinstitute those that Trump had that would be able to keep those numbers at Trump's level. But the last and most important thing to remember is this. When the Democratic Party, including Joe Biden, were asked on the debate stage whether or not it should be a criminal offense for people to come illegally, illegal migrants, none raised their hand. When they were asked if they should get benefits, all raise their hand. When they interview people that are crossing the border, why are you here? They say because they think Biden will let them in. They thought Trump would keep them away, and they think Biden will let them in. And that's exactly what's happening. And because of that, there's
Sorry,
not just...
they, Rob?
What's that?
Who's they? Who's they? You're talking about the people
The
who raise their
Democratic
hand?
Party? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, the illegal immigrants is who I'm talking about.
Was this a focus group?
No, it wasn't a focus group. Let me finish my point, and then you could ask me a question
Sorry.
if you want. So,
Sorry.
real quick to finish the point. So, we could see that it's a humanitarian crisis of people that are being smuggled by coyotes, that are being sexually trafficked. And we now also see that are in its place where World War III or a significant conflict with Iran, China, that which Noah's talked about, fearful of a war with China. We see all sorts of people from those nationalities that are now coming across the border unvetted. It is a disaster that's already occurred, and it's waiting to explode even further. And it's happened solely because of the policies and the position that Joe Biden has set forth.
Okay. What do you think, Noah? Go ahead. Biden's policies on the border. Go ahead.
Right. First, I just want to say, I think people don't understand where this border crisis is coming from, why it's happening. And this is something I found only after reading a hell of a lot about immigration. I was going to write a book about immigration, actually, and I read about 35 books about it. But I didn't find what was causing this border crisis until I just really researched the law. The problem is asylum. So according to this 1967 treaty that we signed, the UN Convention on the Status of Refugees, you can't discriminate against someone on an asylum request if they enter the country illegally. We signed and ratified that. And that was dumb because nobody at the time anticipated this kind of crisis, even though they should have, because they were just dumb. And I don't know, because I wasn't there in 1967. Not that old. So, but the problem is now, at some point starting in the 2010s, but then really continuing recently, more and more, everybody in the world, including, originally Central America, but then the whole world realized that if you can get across the border and turn yourself into the border patrol, You can request asylum, and they have to give you a hearing because we signed that treaty. That's the law, and we passed a law about asylum that says you have to do that. And so that's stupid. And so what we need to do is just reform that law and change that law so that if you cross the border illegally, you're not allowed to apply for asylum. Say, sorry, 1967 UN Convention on the Status of Human Refugees. That was a mistake. We're not going to abide by that. And then, sue us, okay? But, all right, so that's what we need to do. We need to change that law. So far, I have seen only one human being ever mention that law needs to be changed. That happened to be Joe Biden. But not to give Biden too much credit here, he didn't harp on it a lot. He just said, until we change that law, things will never change. He's right. Rob is right that there are a lot of people in the Democratic Party who don't want to do anything about this, who do not see this as a problem at all. And it was deeply ironic when red state governors decided, okay, let's bus some of these people to New York. Let's bus some of these people to Martha's Vineyard. And then there was like, oh my God, we actually have to pay for these people's services. Holy shit. We thought someone else was going to pay, and then they had to pay. And then they were like, okay, this is a crisis. And that's when sentiment really got mad in America about the border crisis. So you're right. You're absolutely right. And many Democrats just thought, oh, we don't need to do anything about this. It's fine. It is not fine. It's a problem. It's and no one recognizes this more than the people on the border. If you go to Texas, where I'm from, and you go down to the border where everybody on the border speaks Spanish, they are the biggest enthusiasts of border security. They want to stop these people from coming over harder than just about anybody. So I'm sympathetic. The border crisis is a crisis. It's because of a shitty law that not enough people care about fixing. Now, Republicans, I have not seen any Republican propose to fix this law. One, not Trump, not Mitch McConnell, not Mike Johnson, not anybody has proposed to fix this law. And it frustrates me because it's like, and my guess is that they just don't know that the law exists and they've never heard of the 1967 UN Convention. I've never heard of her. They've never even heard of it. They don't know what it is. Maybe Mike Johnson knows what it is, but they don't know that this is the root of the problem. So they're not trying to fix it either. So it's a little frustrating. Now, I will say that Biden ignored this problem for too long, and that was a big mistake. He ignored it for years, and only under pressure, only when people started getting really mad about it, did he do anything about it. And the stuff that he started to try to do was very, very similar to the stuff that Trump did, which is to say, break the law. Because Trump issued a bunch of executive orders that were illegal. Unfortunately, they should have been legal, but they were illegal, and courts struck them down because they were in violation of our asylum law, which we signed because we signed the 1967 blah, 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 right? So Trump issued these executive orders. They got struck down. What did Biden do when he finally was forced to acknowledge the problem? He issued the same executive orders Trump did, basically. Slight difference, but basically the same thing. And those will also be struck down by the courts, I promise. All the stuff in the bill that Trump killed, yes, Trump killed it. Yes, he did it because he's a jerk and he didn't want Biden to get a win in the election year. But to be fair, Biden was only doing that in the first place to pander. But the point is that those things in that bill will all get struck down by the courts because the asylum law isn't being changed. And until that asylum law is being changed, so I'm kind of just sitting here going, yeah, it's a big problem. I don't see anybody who actually wants to fix it. And I don't know why. So I'm not going to defend Biden on this, okay? Go ahead. Bash Biden all you want on this.
Sure.
I think it was a big mistake for Biden. But I'm frustrated because I don't think Trump is going to fix it. I think what Trump is going to do is, I don't think he understands the law or why it needs to be fixed or what, I don't think he understands any of that. But even if he did understand, I think it is more politically advantageous to him to keep this crisis going so he can keep yelling and scaring people about it. That's more valuable than actually fixing the border to Trump. And so I'm just frustrated all around. And so I don't know if I'm arguing with you here, but this is my perspective.
So sure, this might be just real quick. This might be a quick topic if you guys are mostly in agreement. But Rob, go ahead.
Okay, so to kind of throw you a bone here a little, I would agree with you that I think when you said there's a lot of Democrats that don't want the problem solved, I agree with you. I think there's a lot of Republicans. I think there are a lot of establishment type Republicans that have no problem with the amount of illegal immigration that comes. And this has been something that before Trump came along, when Trump started talking about the border, if you followed Republican politics, a lot of people in Republican circles were focus group type people were telling Trump, don't talk about immigration. We're telling Republicans, don't talk about it. It's a losing issue. Don't talk about it. And so Trump was the first person that really put a focus in a national spotlight for president on this particular issue. So I agree with you that there are Republican, I will give you a bone if you say there are Democrats. I think there are Republicans that feel the same way. The question is, we're deciding whether or not the Biden presidency has been effective. And on this question of immigration, it clearly hasn't. It's been a disaster. You point to, well, it's because of these international asylum laws that we signed on to, and they need to be revoked. But I don't disagree. I would have to look at the specific law that you're talking about. Possibly that is something that would help. But certainly there are ways to interpret the revocation. Like we could restrict what asylum means to us, or we could just flat out ignore what the international law was. That might not be the best, but the United States has done it before.
We should.
And we're in a crisis in our country. And so the question I have for you is, if it's purely because there's nothing that could be done because of this law, this international law, why the spike under Biden?
Let's bring a couple of reasons. Number one, what you said, everyone thought, oh, Biden's nicer on immigration. He's not gonna throw us in the camps or whatever the hell. Reputation, I think, was a big thing. Number two, is the end of the pandemic and America's super strong growth. If you look at our economy, it's doing better than any other economy. It's doing much better than Mexico. It's doing better than Europe. It's doing better than all these places. It's doing, and then there's a lot of, you see people from China now showing up because China's doing incredibly well right now, despite all the cars that they're making and selling. So our economy so part of it was Biden's reputation, I think, but very little of it was actual policy. But I think that because the courts, had already struck down Trump's restrictions, it took Biden a while to put similar things in place. I think it was the main driver was the spread of information about the asylum loophole. Central Americans, people from like El Salvador and whatever, knew about this in 2014. People from Cameroon knew about this in 2021. Everybody knew it. Just the diffusion of information about this stupid loophole in our law took time. And also America's economy was just so great, everyone wanted to come and work. I think the silliest argument about the borders and people like, these are military-age men, it's an invasion. No, it's working-age men because it's just people who want to work. All they want to do is work. They're not refugees. They're not, like, oh, I was so badly treated in my country. No, you weren't. You just want to work. And you know what? Actually, that's fine. But we should have an orderly process for bringing people into work, not a disorderly process where you get rewarded for breaking the law and crossing the border illegally and turning yourself into the Border Patrol. That's silly. That is the current law. So I agree with you. We should just say 1967 convention, blah, 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 goodbye. We're changing our law. We will have to amend our law. We can't just ignore it because we did make a law that was, when we signed that convention, it said you have to make your own law that says this, right? And we did. We passed a law on asylum, our own domestic law, not some international treaty, that says if you cross illegally, you still get full asylum claim and we can't kick you out and blah, 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 as long as you turn yourself in. We signed that. And it's not just that we signed that, it's that we made that law for ourselves. And so we have to revoke it. We have to cancel it. Only Congress can do that. My worry is that the MAGA people don't want to fix it because they want to have something to scare people about. They want to have something to shout about. Maybe that's paranoid. Maybe they would like to fix it. I'd like to fix it. I would gladly support them if they wanted to change this law. If Trump was president, gets elected, and he said tomorrow, we've got to change this law so you can't get asylum if you cross the border illegally. I would be like, I support you, Trump. Done.
So I guess,
and I'm just wondering why that never happened.
My area of disagreement would be this. I think what was the House bill that was put forth, H.R. 2, was far more stringent and would have done far more than what the Senate suggested that the Democrats are pushing forth. So I think you should support that bill. So the idea that Republicans in general or MAGA people wouldn't push, I think they would. They're pushing for a stronger bill. And if Senate, and the other thing I would say is just this is anecdotal. And I don't know if you saw this, but I saw Brett Weinstein go to the Darien Gap, which is a big sort of thoroughfare that people are coming through from South America to get in. And he said that there are basically two kinds of migrants that are coming. There are those exactly you hear about that are good people, basically economic migrants, not really refugees, but they're coming for good work. Okay. By the way, those people would have been coming pre-COVID as well. If you're coming from places like Venezuela or Nicaragua, whatever, these countries, there was economic incentive always to come to the United States. So I don't buy that COVID's the reason that so many are mobilized. But he also said that there was another camp of people he saw, and those were particularly Chinese nationals. And he said the feeling was incredibly hostile. They had entire camps set up, and that they were basically instructed not to talk to journalists or not to talk to people that were there, and that he felt there was almost something nefarious about it. So I'm just saying, particularly from your perspective as someone who's worried about an upcoming conflict with China, I think that there are many, many reasons that we could spend hours talking about the problem with how much illegal immigration, economic, socially, culturally, crime, illness and things that could come through. But I think one of the big things that we should be talking about is the potential for this porous border weakening us to enemies that could have terrorist strike or attack our infrastructure in certain ways. And I just think that the Biden administration, it has been an abysmal failure, and there is no sign that going forward a vote for Joe Biden or the Democratic Party in general would do anything to alleviate this. At least the Republicans are paying lip service to saying this. Democrats still are fighting with half of their constituents that think we should have complete open borders. So they can't come out and do anything about it, just like you're seeing with Israel-Palestine, which maybe we'll get to at some point. The Democrat Party split. Half of these young progressives are like, oh no, we have to welcome everyone with open arms. You know, the Statue of Liberty says X. And then half the Democratic Party's like old school, like union people that are like, what are you doing? You're depressing our wages. Like, we can't have any more of these people you're taking away our town buildings to house illegal immigrants, etc. And if we're not careful, we're going to end up like Europe, like the UK, which I just saw a poll on Britain, Good Morning Britain the other day. Good Morning Britain polled their audience if multiculturalism was a success. 95% said no, because the landscape of their entire country is shifting so radically that they don't even recognize their country. And that's what's going to happen if we continue to have presidencies like Joe Biden.
I'll let you respond, then I want to get to the economics section of the debate. But go ahead.
I have one question though before for Rob, if that's okay.
Yeah, it's your chance to respond. So go ahead.
Yeah, Chinese guys coming in. I know a couple people who know a couple of the Chinese guys who have snuck in that way. And they were telling me about these. These are my friends are crypto people, and they help sneak the Chinese people in with crypto.
Okay.
By the way, one of the biggest uses of crypto is to get money out of China. And they said these guys, coming in, they basically don't even consider themselves Chinese anymore. They hate, they're like, such bullshit has gone down. Like, they're like, I'm ethnically Chinese, but I don't want anything to do with, Xi Jinping and the stuff that's going on. When Ronald Reagan was president, we had this thing, and I am not really that old enough to remember. I remember Reagan's last speech. I was like, I think 5, 6. So then I was 5, I guess. So when Ronald Reagan left, he was like, we're the city on a hill, to all these people, escaping these horrible regimes. And I know that China sucks, and it sucks worse than people say. Like, it's more sucky on the inside than it looks to us on the outside, or for tourists who just go see like the delivery robots and whatever that they have. Like, for regular people, it sucks more. I feel for these people, and I want to be like Reagan told us to be. And I don't care if that makes me a bad Democrat for saying that Reagan was good. But I've said it online, and I got dogpiled online for saying
You're out,
this.
man. You're out now. You just
out.
got kicked out of the club. No, I don't. But
Who cares?
This is the problem.
I'm just a blogger. They don't care.
Look,
but
sorry,
what do we do about these guys? What do we do about the Chinese guys who really want to escape Xi Jinping and the bullshit that's going on there?
Well, we have to accept it is the duty of our government to represent the people of this country and the citizens of this country. And so any immigration system that we have shouldn't be because of moral concerns for other people. We shouldn't actively do no harm. I'm not saying we should go out and steal a country's resources because screw them. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is, as long as there are people that need the services of the government here, we shouldn't be worried about being morally virtuous to people around the world. And so any immigration system, particularly with these group of people that are trying to flee Xi, we would have to accept that the people that we were bringing in, we think would be of net benefit to our country. So we're not doing it as a favor. We're doing it because it would be net beneficial to us. And the problem is, just like when you hear people say things like this, well, 97% of people that are let go return for their immigration hearing. And the problem is, right, but if there were bad people like in ISIS or working for the Chinese government, do you think they'd be in the 97% that returned or the 3% that wouldn't? And so the problem is by allowing this sort of system where we're allowing this flood, basically an open border where anyone who wants to come basically gets to come through. If a country was going to be hostile to us, which is inevitable, countries like Iran, China, North Korea, etc., they are going to exploit this system. And there will inevitably come a time. And then what's terrible is not only will there be some bad event that occurs, but then the very people that have allowed this porous border will then use that event as an excuse to strip more rights from Americans, just like we saw with things like the Patriot Act. So I think that while we're telling Americans you can't go through an airport without getting sniffed like you're an 8-year-old girl by Joe Biden, we at the same time have this open border where we're allowing all of these people to come through. It's just counterintuitive. It once more represents what I think the Biden administration has represented, which is this is an America last presidency. They care less about the citizens of this country and more about, doing things to help people globally or help people around the world.
Any response to that?
Oh, sure. Which is to say, I understand that we have to operate this country for the benefit of us. But I also feel that I benefit from people being in my country who, A, can work and support our country, and B, hate our enemies. And that was what we did during the Cold War. I think we got, all the Cubans who hated Castro came here. And now, that's why Cuba's a red state. So if you like having Republicans get elected,
there was a lot of criminals, though, that Castro unleashed that
a
came
lot of
across.
criminals.
Well.
I saw Scarface. I saw that.
Eating octopus every day. Yeah.
Eating octopus. Yeah, but okay. Snorting a mountain of cocaine. Say hello to my little friend. Anyway, but the point is that, I know we got criminals, but the point is we got lots of people who improved this country because they wanted to escape the communists. There's nothing wrong with wanting to escape communists. I wish that modern day conservatives and MAGA people would understand that there's nothing wrong with people who want to get away from the commies. There's nothing wrong with that. And our country is stronger for having those people in it. Their children will be Republican voters. They can't vote themselves, but their children will be. And yeah,
I'll just answer 10 seconds.
I'm stronger. I'm stronger to have those people. I'm not because they're going to do my lawn, because they're not, but because that will strengthen the polity of my country. They're going to join the military. They're going to provide valuable intelligence, by the way.
I'll just answer 10 seconds and then we can move on if you want. I'll just say the problem I'm having, though, is even if you're right that that's 95% of the people, if we have a system that's set up that's so porous that could be taken advantage of by these very countries like China, it eventually will. So even if you're right that 95% of these Chinese immigrants that are coming or illegals that are coming are actually anti-Xi, right? The problem is the 5% that will still be loyal to Xi. And the damage that they would be able to do would far outweigh. So if you want to have the system like the Cuban system, you can't have them flooding in like that occurred. What you want is a proper vetting. Hopefully, if we get to foreign policy, we'll talk about Afghanistan. I have no problem with Afghani translators that helped us in Afghanistan being welcomed into our country. What I have a problem with is we left almost all of them there and mass rushed in people that we didn't vet. That's the problem. And so to say, but I welcome people that don't like the Taliban, of course, that's an argument that could be made, but that's not the only group of people we're getting. And that's the problem with having this open border. Just one of many.
Fair enough.